Marcus slid the sealed envelope toward me in his glass office and said, "Jordan, congratulations." Resentment tightened my throat
This is the
before
original.
the words finished falling. People were whispering beyond the walls. I could hear a chair scrape,
The timestamp.
then a laugh forced into silence. The central problem hit inside those seconds. A raise meant to reward my work had already become the fault line between me and Maya. I looked at the envelope, at Marcus' composed face, and knew the office had just rewritten our quiet bargain. I had been halfway down the corridor when Marcus called my name. I turned and saw him rise from behind the desk, the afternoon sun catching the rim of his watch. I had expected a routine check-in. I had not expected a promotion sent across glass. I kept my hands in my pockets because my left thumb twitched against the worn leather strap of my watch. My palms felt the grit of the day, stamped receipts, coffee grounds in the break room sink, ordinary weight against the suddenness of the decision. I had been careful for years. I opened the envelope with the thumb I always used to win the watch. The offer letter was crisp, the numbers exact. Marcus' voice filled the room like an invoice. Regional lead role. Start next month. He smiled the sort of smile that cost nothing here and everything elsewhere. I swallowed and said, "Thank you, Marcus." My voice did not match the tightness behind my ribs. Resentment was the first thing I noticed. Then a second feeling came after the door clicked, and someone else cleared their throat in the corridor. Guilt. The guilt arrived as a pressure behind my eyes when I thought of Maya waiting outside. She had stayed late the last 3 months, missing dinner, picking up extra shifts, and once, when I couldn't cover her shift, she had taken mine without asking for thanks. The memory of her handing me a boxed salad and saying, "You earned it, Jordan," returned so clearly that my fingers tightened around the paper. Marcus stood and walked to the window. He put a hand on the glass and said, "You earned it, Jordan. Everyone sees it, my name like a ledger entry." I wanted to believe him in that moment. I had led the underperforming store through 2 inventory cycles, cut shrink, negotiated vendor credits. I had pulled numbers into line from 3 different managers. Those were facts. But facts didn't speak to promises made in corridors, over late, night coffee, between 2 people who had joked about splitting a promotion if one of us ever got it. The corridor door opened and Maya stepped in without knocking. She had been on the stairwell. I saw the edge of her tote, the way her shoulder blade moved when she exhaled. She saw me, then Marcus. Her face went still, she walked closer, and even 2 paces in, the office felt smaller. Maya's voice was low but sharp. "Jordan," my name like it carried a debt. "Maya, you took it." Her laugh came out like paper tearing. "Jordan, you took the promotion." She kept her arms folded, the way she always did when she was trying to hold herself steady. She did not look at Marcus. She looked at me, waiting for me to explain that I had not known. The people beyond the glass shifted. Someone whispered my name. The manager on the floor had paused in the doorway with a coffee cup halfway to his mouth. I could have handled that whole way differently. I chose a sentence that moved toward explanation instead of blame. "Marcus called me in," I said. "It wasn't anything I asked for," but Maya's eyes narrowed. "It wasn't anything you asked for," she repeated, slow and careful, and the music in the background, faint, seemed to underline her disbelief. Resentment shifted under my skin into confusion. How had a private promise become public? How had conversations over microwaved meals become overwritten by a memo? We moved into the open, plan meeting area because Marcus decided we needed a team update. He arranged us around a high table, more to frame the decision than to discuss it. Marcus used business language, the kind that smooths edges. "This is a strategic move for the region." Jordan's performance metrics made this the logical next step. He spoke as if metrics were explanations that required no context. "Maya, what about the earlier agreement?" Her voice hit the glass and rang. Marcus answered with the company's priorities and talked around the phrase, "earlier agreement," without using it. I watched Maya's jaw work while Marcus spoke. She kept touching the chain around her neck, one finger tracing the pendant when she listened. The team looked between us, their faces a series of small calculations. A teammate, Lina, who had stalked the backroom with me the long nights, cleared her throat and said, "Jordan, congrats." Her sentence was short. It landed like a coin. I wanted the congratulations. I also wanted the private promise honored. At the break room later, the conversation turned sharp. Maya set her mug down too hard and stayed, standing with her back to the counter. "You promised me a shot at this," she said. "You mean you were already talking to Marcus about stepping me up next quarter?" Her arms stayed folded. She used my name. "Jordan, that's what you said." I tasted iron when she said it. My mouth went dry. The emotion shifted again. Confusion compressed into hurt. I said, "Maya, I did tell Marcus that you'd be ready. I told him how you handled returns when the scanner failed, how you stayed after the flood at Store 5. I said those things. My words landed fast. Maya's laugh cut through. "Jordan, that's not the same as a promise." Her lips pressed into a line. "Promises matter." She named the breach like a wound. She knew that Marcus had spoken to her months ago in private, and that in the hallway she had taken that as confirmation. She kept searching my face for a different expression, as if what she wanted was to find some hidden betrayal in my eyes. I tried to explain the timing, the needs of the region, the way leadership thinks about headcount and budget. Every business phrase I used widened the distance. Maya's face hardened. "Jordan, you have to understand how that looks." To me, the sentence was precise. I left to find Marcus and was met with a closed door follow-up. He didn't wait in the open this time. I knocked, and he looked up from his planner with the calm of a man who had rehearsed discomfort and never actually needed to experience it. Marcus explained the business rationale again. We needed someone who'd take the workload now, not later. He put the responsibility on urgency, on a risk calculus. He added, "You will need to take point on the team morale." He smiled, then leaned back. He had just shifted the burden of repair to me. Walking back down the corridor, deadline noise and late emails floating around, I felt the weight of Marcus' words. Responsibility sat in my shoulders. The emotion moved from guilt back toward a different tone. Pressure. I could either let Maya slip away or do the thing managers do, manage the optics, stitch frayed edges. I had never wanted to be the kind of person who measured relationships like a line item. But the envelope weighed in my hand and felt like a new object in my life. A promotion, yes. A responsibility, definitely. A wedge, unexpectedly. That evening, Marcus called an impromptu team meeting in the glass room to frame the promotion. He opened with strategy, then pivoted to culture. "We all want to keep this team together." His voice was even. Maya came in after me and sat without looking at me. She wore her tortoiseshell glasses on top of her head, as if she needed a barrier. When Marcus invited questions, hands rose slowly like cautious fish. A senior advisor, Peter, asked about the selection process. Marcus explained with careful steps, metrics, leadership needs, future structure. He used jargon like a barrier. At one point Maya stood and asked, "Was there a promise? Did you ever say she'd get this?" She pointed at me by name. The meeting folded into tension. "Marcus, we make calls for the business." "Maya, we make calls for people too." "Marcus." The exchange shortened into quick breaths, a string of honest phrases. After the meeting, the floor hummed. Someone left a post-it on my desk that read, "Congrats, J.L." I held it and then crumpled it in my fist because paper felt like a flimsy thing to hold against a broken expectation. Maya avoided my desk. She walked past without meeting my eyes. The present shifted into a sequence of small collisions. When we had to coordinate schedules for a weekend audit, she replaced me on the rotation without asking. The silent removal felt louder than any accusation. 3 days later, I caught sight of an exchange I hadn't expected. Maya and Marcus talking in the stairwell outside the break room. I paused at the stairwell landing and heard her voice carry up a mix of anger and fear. I crept nearer and heard Marcus say, "I didn't promise her that role, Maya." I said I saw potential. Maya snapped, "Then say that to her, Marcus. Say that you didn't promise me." The stairwell door had a crack of light. My chest tightened. The emotion slid into something colder, betrayal. I walked into the stairwell and stepped between them. "Maya," I said, using her name to regain a thread. "Marcus, what did you tell her?" The exchange hardened. Marcus looked at me and said, I said what Ivy said at every review. Potential and timing. Jordan's metrics pushed him forward. Maya fired back quickly. Marcus, you told me differently. When the head count opens, Maya, I'll make sure you are first in line. You mean that in private. Her voice was not loud, but it had the exactness of someone reciting a contract. Marcus's jaw shifted. He did not deny the phrasing immediately. He chose a different route. I didn't say it as a promise. I said it to encourage her. The answer was a shape that avoided responsibility. The confrontation in the stairwell became the pivot. Maya stepped closer and pointed. Marcus, encouraging is not a promise. Jordan, you stood there when I told you. You didn't correct me. Her eyes punched at me with question marks. I felt the room move again. My reflex was to defend. I said, Maya, I never heard those exact words from Marcus. I thought we were talking hypothetically. She shook her head. She laughed a short, bitter sound, hypothetically. Jordan, you laughed the last time. You will split the promotion if it ever comes. She named it. Now the memory of that laughing exchange came back. Two rewritten moments, one said aloud and now turning into evidence. The emotion shifted under me, resentment to guilt to panic. Panic made my hands fumble with the keycard. I started to speak, but Marcus held up a hand and said enough. He checked his watch, and then his tone tightened like a document stapled shut. We will not hash this out in the stairwell. We'll meet in my office. Now he looked at both of us with an evenness that meant he intended to close the moment. The late status update became the stage for the climax. Team members hovered in the corridor and peered through the glass. Maya came in and did not sit. She stood with her arms folded and said, Marcus, tell Jordan what you told me. Marcus remained seated and folded his hands. I made a call for the business. Jordan has earned his role. Maya stepped forward and said, Marcus, you told me a different thing. You promised I would be next in line. The word promise like a dropped plate. Marcus's face did not move much, but his eyes measured us. Jordan, you must include rapid back and forth here. The argument unfolded fast. Marcus, you said it to me. Maya's voice was terse. Maya, I said I saw potential. I did not make a formal promise, Marcus answered. Then why tell me it would be my turn? Maya demanded. Because I wanted you to aim higher, Marcus replied. That's not a promise, Marcus. Maya shot back. It sounded like one to her. I said. Jordan, I said. Marcus, it sounded like a promise. Maya blinked as if the sentence had been tossed to her. The exchange had 3 rapid rounds, and in each we named each other. People outside the office watched. Marcus finally stood and said in a clipped voice, Both of you, enough. This is not the floor for recriminations. We will hold a formal review process and communicate outcomes. Until then, act professionally. He shifted the meeting into a directive that tried to reset us into workplace behavior. The climax felt like a public stripping of a private thing. When the doors opened after Marcus dismissed us, the team left with quiet commentary. Maya did not follow them. She stayed in the corridor and leaned against the glass wall with her arms folded. I went up to her and said, Maya, talk to me. Tell me what you need. She looked at me and did the thing she always did when she was trying to be measured and failing. She laughed so it sounded like a sob. I need you to tell me the truth, Jordan, she said. Did you know Marcus that? Did you know he told me he'd make me next? She used my name to probe, to pull out accountability. The emotion shifted again. My panic cooled into something steadier, determination. I realized that to keep anything I needed to act and not just explain. I set my shoulders and said, Maya, I didn't hear those words from Marcus. I heard him encourage you. I said things in a joking way that I shouldn't have. I didn't correct the misunderstanding, and that was on me. My words were short. I used her name 3 times. She let out a breath and said, Jordan, that still leaves me with a decision to make. She pushed away from the glass and walked toward the stairwell. I followed. We passed the cleaning crew rolling carts. An external event happened. The head of Herfer, Elaine, followed us into the stairwell and said in a low voice, Marcus me to close any informal promises. I'll arrange an interim review. Her presence shifted the negotiation from personal to procedural. We stood on the landing while people moved around us like tides. Maya, Jordan, "I'm not sure I can keep working with someone who won't call out a mistake when it matters," she it plainly. I searched for a solution. I offered to step back from the promotion if that would fix it. "Jordan," she said, "that's not the point. The point was trust." I had to choose a response that showed action rather than argument. That night I sat on the office balcony and unfolded the offer letter again. The city lights were smeared into bokeh because I kept my eyes slightly unfocused. I ran a thumb over the raised type of the company seal until my skin stung. The letter was both a reward and an H. I could feel the shift in how people treated me at the water cooler. Congratulations were laced with caution. My hands trembled once when the cleaning crew's radio crackled and someone mentioned a new schedule. I folded the paper and slid it into my wallet. The small act felt like an attempt at custody, keeping something safe. I didn't resolve everything that night. I sent a message to Marcus requesting a private meeting about how to handle the team's morale and a formal schedule for reviews. I texted Maya a message that read, "Can we talk tomorrow? I want to hear everything you remember, word for word." I used her name to close the message because names are anchors. She replied with a time and an ellipsis. The pause unsettled me more than any accusation. Before I left the building, I passed the glass conference room. Lina stood there, and when she saw me she said, "Jordan, I don't want to pick sides. I just want work that feels fair." She used the word fair. Her sentence made me think about the practical costs of the split. Who covers inventories? Who trains new hires? Who will stay late to troubleshoot returns? Fair was not an abstract ideal. It was shifts and schedules and weekend audits. The chapter closes on the concrete beat I cannot avoid. I stepped out onto the balcony, the envelope in my pocket, and saw Maya below by the service door. She had her totes slung over one shoulder and one hand on the metal handle. She did not look up. I called her name once, then again. She heard me, then paused her hand on the handle. That pause was a decision in itself. I folded the letter tighter and slid it under the leather of my wallet. The night smelled of coffee and city exhaust. I said, "Maya," and she lifted her face. Her eyes held a question I could not answer with a press release. She 2 words, "We talk." I nodded. The final sound of the chapter is the click of the service door as she let it close behind her, and the noise of the floor receding into something I would have to fix. The immediate conflict, the promise, the raise, the broken trust, had been exposed and called into the light. I had stepped into a responsibility I had not expected to carry, and the next choices would either mend the seam or widen it. The balcony light blinked twice and went steady. The chapter ends with Maya's hand on the metal handle and the letter folded in my wallet, both small objects that demanded decisions. Maya barreled past the break area coffee machine, pointed at my chest, and said, "You took it, Jordan." The floor froze. People stopped typing. 3 chairs scraped at once. Resentment arrived on her tongue and landed in the center of the open plan, and I felt it hit the whole room with her. She had the look she only ever wore when she thought someone had stolen something from her life. I ducked under a tidy stack of reports and stood where she could not miss me. I said, "Maya, not like that," and the words came out controlled because I needed to buy time. Within 5 sentences the stakes were clear. A raise, an accusation, the knowledge that behind the glass Marcus had already announced a change. The envelope Marcus slid to me in his office earlier this week, "Jordan, congratulations," was now not private. People had read it as permission to choose sides. My baseline until that moment had been manager-friend and the person who wanted to keep both roles. Now those roles were under scrutiny. Maya jabbed again. "You took credit for my idea in the presentation, Jordan. You took the raise." Her voice broke on the last word. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. I felt my jaw tighten. I thought of Marcus sliding the sealed envelope across his desk. I heard the forced laugh from beyond his glass office. I remembered Elena in her mentioning a recommendation. That memory was a line on my screen, a header in an email I had not forwarded to Maya. Resentment pushed me toward explanation and away from silence. "Maya," I said. And I led her toward the empty conference room, because the crowd was swallowing words, and I did not want her to fall into them. She followed without answering. People watched our path. Thomas mouthed something at a colleague, and someone else lifted a phone. I felt visible in a way I never had in the back of house hours when we closed stores together. In the glass conference room, I closed the door and turned so the light would not blind me. "Tell me what you heard," I said. I started with the facts. The stretch assignment last quarter, the project evaluation, Marcus' note about succession planning. I pointed to my calendar entries on my phone and to the email from Alina that listed the criteria. I spoke with a measured voice because I wanted to keep the conversation tethered to concrete items. Maya crossed her arms and refused to meet my eyes. "You never told me any of that, Jordan. You never told me you were in line." She laughed once, sharp. "You let me do the client calls. You let me sit in the room while you nodded. Then you accept the raise." Her words were short and clipped. "She my name like a blade." I fumbled a reply. "I didn't know they'd move so fast." "You didn't know," she repeated, and her brows narrowed. "Jordan, you've always been the one who knows how to say the right thing to Marcus. You owe me the truth." She folded her arms tighter. Her palms left white marks on her forearms. I tried to make her see the selection criteria. I opened her email on my laptop and slid it across the table. "Look at the metrics, Maya." "Alina's note," I said. The screen's blue light showed every small movement on her face. "Alina recommended a candidate for the stretch. She named me because of last quarter's results and the client retention numbers." I said it plainly. Maya leaned forward and pointed at the spreadsheet. "You didn't forward it to me. You didn't tell me you asked to be considered. You didn't fight for me. You sat there and watched those numbers become yours." Her voice lost its restraint. "Jordan, you didn't stand up for me when I brought the data. You smiled and let the managers nod." She my name 3 times in a row, each time softer, as if testing whether I would answer. I felt an emotion shift from automatic defense into a hollowing guilt that tightened my hands around the laptop. I remembered walking the floor last year, staying late so she could pick up her daughter at daycare. I remembered her joke about us climbing the ladder together. I swallowed. "Maya, I should have told you about the recommendation. I didn't want to make you feel pressured." My voice dropped. "I thought I could explain it later. I misjudged it. I'm sorry." Her laugh came out flat. "Sorry doesn't undo the memo thread, Jordan." She pushed the laptop back. "Not when everyone else already knows. Not when people whisper and look at me like I wasn't doing the work. You think words fix this?" She stood abruptly. The chair scraped. "You think you can apologize and it will be fine." We argued in short bursts then, 3 quick exchanges that snapped between us. "Jordan, you took the raise." "Maya, I didn't take anything from you." "No, Jordan. You watched it leave the room." "I was recommended." "Who recommended you?" "Marcus and Alina." "Marcus," she said. Then she forced a dry laugh. "Marcus recommended you, and you accepted." The door opened. Marcus's silhouette filled the short space of glass, and then he stepped in with his palms open an even gait. He did not slam the door. He did not raise his voice. He set a plain manila envelope on the table. "Jordan, Maya, Marcus." He read the room with the calm he always used. "We need to clear this up now." He gestured toward the spreadsheet. "I based that decision on measurable outcomes and team succession needs. Jordan's recent client retention rose 40% in the last 2 quarters. That factored into my call." Maya's shoulders dropped for the first time. 40% doesn't erase teamwork," she said. "It doesn't erase the calls I sat through while you listened, Jordan." She looked at me with a wound that had widened into accusation. Marcus' voice stayed even. "I know how you work, Maya. I value that. This was a business decision. We looked at deliverables, ownership, times when someone stepped into a leadership slot. Jordan stepped into several stretch assignments, and his manager recommended him for the promotion. He tapped the envelope. That's the sequence. Publicly and administratively." Maya's mouth pressed thin. "You say business decision, and it sounds like you have no idea what that does to people." She spoke directly to Marcus now. "You handed an envelope and you let loyalty fracture a decade of work. You could have explained the path. You could have made it transparent." Marcus replied with precise sentences. "We hold people accountable for outcomes. I make choices that stabilize the team. He checked his watch. This was not meant to hurt anyone. It was meant to keep the region on track. The team on the floor had gathered near the glass. Whispers began rising like a slow hiss. Someone forwarded a message in the group chat. Someone else opened the internal memo and read it aloud. A new rhythm of rumor moved through us. I felt my options narrow. The emotional tone slid from guilt to frustration. I clenched my hands until the watch band left an imprint. I realized I had not accounted for how quickly the office would turn a personnel move into a social verdict. An internal message pinged on my phone. It was a copy of the memo with a short note. Promotion posted. The chat thread turned into a commentary feed. Thomas sent a GIF. Elena from her popped her head in and asked to speak with me in her office after Marcus left. Her presence felt like a door opening on a chain of invisible decisions. I left the conference room because the air felt too small. I walked back to my desk and found that someone had already started an often thread suggesting favoritism. People I had shared late shifts with avoided my eyes. My chest tightened. I moved to an empty workstation and opened the Her inbox logs on my screen. I scrolled until I found an internal Her note I had not previously seen. A recommendation from my previous project manager that named me for a stretch assignment 6 months prior, and a separate line not visible to everyone, indicating Marcus had discussed succession paths with Elena 2 months ago. I read the timestamp and followed the chain. The note showed a conversation about who might take the next step if a senior manager left. It named candidates and it referenced the stretch assignment results. Near the bottom, a single line from Elena read. Jordan shows consistent leadership during coverage. Consider for next open manager role. The line was short and administrative. But beneath it was an earlier comment I had never noticed. Maya declined to take full ownership of the Q3 case due to personal scheduling conflicts. That sentence hit me like a shift in the floor. I felt another emotion shift then, confusion slipping into a raw sense of surprise. If Maya had declined a full ownership slot in Q3 because of a scheduling conflict, then the metrics and the recommendation chain had a rationale beyond favoritism. My first reaction was to think, how had I missed this? My second reaction was guilt that I had not spoken up to clarify or to make sure Maya knew these administrative notes existed. I left my desk and went to Elena S. Small, her office. She had her glasses on and held a paper cup of tea. Jordan, she said without preface, I wanted to make sure you saw the recommendation and the notes. I assumed you and Maya had spoken about the Q3 ownership. I did to see the note that Maya had declined full ownership, I said. I showed the screen. Why was this not obvious in the staff memo? Elena tapped the folder. We try to balance privacy and clarity. The decline was recorded in a separate thread with permission. It was not part of the public metrics because it involved personal scheduling and we honor that. I probably should have flagged it in the team memo. That was my oversight. She moved her hand like she was arranging papers on a table, so it looks like favoritism to the floor, because the context wasn't there, I said. Elena nodded, yes, and Marcus made a call on who fit the business needs at the time. He prioritized someone who had covered while senior managers were out. He wasn't telling the whole narrative in the open plan, because he thought it was a private staffing matter. I left Elena's office with a small packet of internal notes printed. I felt a strange, small relief because there was a justification I could point to. At the same time, the relief did not fix Maya's hurt. The rumor had already done damage. I ran back upstairs to the balcony walkway because I needed air and because I knew Maya went there when she had to make a decision in public. She was already on the balcony, sleeves rolled up, looking out at the city lights. The office lights reflected on the glass behind her. She did not turn when I approached. Jordan, she said without looking, why didn't you stop it? I put both hands on the railing. The night smelled faintly of rain and car exhaust. I didn't know the decline was logged that way, I said. Elena me about it 5 minutes ago. I didn't mean to let you take the social cost. Maya laughed once. You didn't mean to. Did you also not mean to accept it? She turned and faced me. Her eyes were wide, and the expression was not the accusation from before but something rawer. You owe me more than an explanation, Jordan. You owe me a fight in the moment. You owe me recognition in the room. When the envelope was pushed across Marcus' desk, I heard the clarity arrive then, an emotion shift from guilt into a brittle resolve. I could see clearly what my choices were. I could either defend the administrative chain and keep the role, or I could act to repair the fracture I had helped cause. I let the words come out in short bursts. Maya, I didn't speak up. I didn't push for you. I let the sequence become this. I will fix the process transparency. I will talk to Marcus tomorrow about changing how we communicate promotions. But I will not take your hurt back by lecturing you. She stepped closer so our shoulders nearly touched. Her voice dropped. Then start by saying my name when you explain why you were chosen. Start by telling people I did the work that led to those numbers. Say it slowly. Say it here and say it in the team chat and in Marcus's office. Maya held my gaze until I answered. I walked downstairs after that with a decision forming. I went straight to Marcus' office and knocked. He opened the door. Jordan, he said, back so soon. I closed the door behind me. Marcus, I need transparency in these decisions, I said. I set Alina's printed notes on his desk. I found a thread that shows Maya declined Q3 full ownership for scheduling reasons, which influenced the recommendation chain. You framed this as a business decision, and that was true, but the lack of context has hurt team morale. We need a clearer communication plan. My tone was calm but firm. Marcus read the note and folded his hands. Jordan, I'm aware of that thread. I made a hard call based on who could step into leadership during absences. I thought it was a personnel matter best handled with discretion. Discretion turned into a mission, I said. It looks like favoritism. It looks like secrecy. We can keep privacy and still tell the team that decisions considered availability and prior stretch assignments. We can be honest without publishing private details. We owe that to Maya and to the team. I looked at him. Can you commit to a statement tomorrow that explains the criteria? Marcus paused and then, with the precise cadence he used in meetings, said, I can issue a team note that explains the criteria without sharing private details. I can also set up a process to flag candidates so managers know who was considered. That is reasonable. I felt the tension ease slightly. Marcus added, Jordan, I didn't intend to fracture a friendship. If you want me to include an acknowledgement that Maya led the client work on Q3, I'll add it to the note. I closed my mouth to keep from saying something that would sound like a plea. Instead I said, yes, include that. The words were short. Marcus checked his watch and nodded. He tapped his pen and the pen's tiny click sounded steady. After I left Marcus' office, I went back onto the balcony to find Maya sitting on the low wall, hands folded around a paper cup of coffee. The city lights blurred into small discs below. I sat down beside her. We did not speak for a long minute, but neither of us left. I handed her the work planner printout and pushed it toward her. She glanced at it and then looked at me. Will you tell them I did the work? She asked. Her voice was small in that moment. It was not the angry woman from the floor, but someone who wanted a simple human acknowledgement. Yes, I said. I'll say it now in the thread and I'll tell Marcus to include it in the note. I'll explain your role in Q3 and the circumstances of coverage decisions. I'll make the process clearer so this doesn't happen to someone else. My voice held a quiet firmness. Maya watched my hands, then gave a brief nod. Make it quick. She gave a short, dry laugh. People love long explanations, only when they get to decide who to believe. She folded her arms again, less like armor and more like a reminder. I stayed until the office lights dimmed to after-hours cleaning mode. The team left in small groups. Before I left the building, I typed a short message in the team channel, naming Maya and outlining the selection criteria, the role of coverage assignments, and the support Alina provided in recording private scheduling issues. The message was factual and included a single sentence that credited Maya with leading Q3 client efforts. I wrote it plainly and then hit send. Maya replied with a one-line reaction. Thanks, it was neither closure nor acceptance, but it was communication. I left for the night with a plan in place. A meeting with Marcus in the morning to finalize the team's statement and a scheduled sit down with Maya to review how we handle stretch assignments going forward. On the stairwell landing, I stopped and looked at the sealed envelope I had kept in my desk, my physical reminder of a choice that had consequences. I tucked it back into a folder and slid the folder into my briefcase. The action felt small and deliberate. I had promised to repair, and the first concrete step was a public acknowledgement and a private process change. When I stepped out into the night air, I did not tell myself that everything was fixed. I only held the decision. Speak up, credit the work, and change the communication. That was the concrete thing I would do tomorrow. The office night lights behind me dimmed as I walked away. I pushed the glass door and saw Maya's hand flat on the table, fingers splayed over the envelope that still smelled faintly of office toner. She did not wait for me to explain before she spoke. "You took it, Jordan." Resentment tightened my jaw in a way I could measure by the way my fingers dug into the briefcase handle. The conference room hummed with after-hours fluorescent light. People were already gathered. Marcus at the head, Lee from her with a tablet open, Ethan standing near the projector. I had not expected an ambush. I had expected to collect my bag and leave. Those first 5 seconds fixed the problem. My promotion stood between two long histories, mine and Maya's, and now it sat on the lacquered table like evidence. I did not say anything at first. I stepped inside, set my briefcase down, and let the quiet stretch the way paper does when you pull it tight. Resentment was the root of every motion in the room. It showed in Maya's tight throat and in the way Marcus folded his hands on the glass. That resentment pushed me to act, not only to defend myself but to find a way back. "Jordan," Marcus, voice steady. He did not rise. I wanted to be clear about the process tonight. Lee tapped the tablet and the room watched the first slide click forward. Marcus's jacket was precise, his cufflinks catching the ceiling light. He kept the tone even as if evenness could fix a broken thing. "Explain it now, Maya." She spoke through her teeth. "Explain why I covered his accounts for months. And you walk out with a title." Her eyes were wet but sharp. "Maya, my name like weighing a coin." I stepped closer and found my words in the facts. "I didn't ask for this to be public, Maya." I didn't. I stopped because Ethan cleared his throat and pushed a stack of printed pages across the table toward me. Papers slid and stopped at my palm. The room smelled of coffee and antiseptic. Ethan's hand was steady when he said, "These are the recommendation notes and the recent performance snapshot." He looked at everyone like he wanted the data to do the talking. I unfolded the top page and read numbers. Sales growth on my accounts, client retention rates, the metrics Marcus had mentioned when he called me in earlier that week. Marcus had used those numbers to justify the raise in private. Now they were a public thing. Maya snatched one page and skimmed. "This is only 3 months," she said. "I handed in the Q4 report last year with numbers that covered Sarah's maternity leave. Jordan covered weekend calls. What happened to that?" She folded her arms, the gesture becoming a shield. Marcus slid his chair back and leaned forward. "We considered extendable coverage, Maya. The opening we had required someone on site for the East account transition." Jordan accepted the assignment and met the deadline. He tapped his pen against the table. Business necessity was the deciding factor. My first emotion shift happened then. Resentment pulsed into doubt. I felt my confidence wobble because doubt began to fill the gaps resentment had carved. Had I taken an assignment that required me to be visible? Had I stepped into something that made me the only practical choice? I remembered the morning Marcus had called me into his office 3 weeks ago and asked if I could take lead on the East account. I had said yes because the client seemed flammable and because I wanted to show I could manage escalation. I had not imagined the raise would land like a wedge between me and Maya. Maya's voice flipped from accusation to a lit list of times. "Jordan, you billed overtime that week I covered a client visit. Jordan, you decided to stay late the day I told you my mother called. Jordan, you told me you'd recommend me for the promotion." Jordan, her sentences clipped off, one after the other. Each Jordan landed like a small, deliberate knock on the conference room table. I gave her a timeline. I remember those weeks, Maya. I remember you staying late. I remember you covering the holiday shift. I thanked you. I told you I would mention it in my review. My mouth had a dry edge. I wanted to tell her everything. That I had thanked her privately, that I had sent a note praising her reliability, that I had meant to push for equitable recognition. But her anger wanted the full gesture in public. Lee from her spoke for the first time with a crispness that fit the tablet in her hands. We followed documented process. Recommendations went to regional review, metrics were verified, and the committee authorized the promotion. The committee notes are here. She set a folded file in front of Marcus, then slid it toward me. Jordan, you met the criteria for the East account. Maya, your records were strong. An external event arrived. Ethan let slip that a recommendation had been rescinded and refiled. There was an internal back channel suggesting the East account needed on-site leadership. And it moved quickly after Marcus escalated the case. He set his phone on the table and opened a forwarded email thread. The subject line read simply, East account lead urgent. A second emotion shift followed the new evidence. Doubt shifted into suspicion. The forwarded email implied someone had stamped urgency on that account and pushed the promotion into the fast lane. That suggested the decision had been less neutral than Lee had said. Suspicion made my fingers go cold. I read the thread. An assistant warning of client expectations, a note from Marcus emphasizing immediate continuity, and then a line I had not noticed before. An endorsement from someone in operations that mentioned Jordan by name. The endorsement read like a tie breaker. Who sent this? Maya demanded. Her arms unfolded, hands curling into fists. Who decided to make that account a reason to jump the queue? Marcus's jaw tightened. This was a cross-functional call. Operations flagged risk. The recommendation reflected that immediate need. He did not name individuals. His voice avoided the word that had appeared in the thread. Escalate. Ethan pushed his chair back. We have timestamps. Some of these notes were after hours. The decision window tightened. He looked at me. Jordan, did you contact operations? The third emotion shift came then. Suspicion moved into a hard clarity that made my next actions decisive. I had to know whether I had been propelled forward by merit or by maneuver. I said, I did not contact operations beyond standard escalation. I took the assignment Marcus offered. I did not push to make the process faster. My hands were steady now because clarity had replaced the fog. Maya scoffed. So the company made a strategic call that happens to put you in the middle of my sacrifices. Her laugh was short. That's convenient for everyone except me. Marcus closed the loop on policy. We choose the candidate who minimizes transition risk. Jordan met the scheduling requirement and volunteered. The raise is tied to that responsibility. He looked at Lee, and Lee confirmed the formal language. This was not the same as saying my merit had nothing to do with it, but it made the choice corporate and less personal. I could see the room drawing lines in the light. Some people in the open plan had gathered at the glass to watch the argument like a feeding trough. Their eyes bounced between faces and numbers. I felt pressure not as a concept but as a physical thing. The tightened flap of my suit where I had begun to sweat, the way my throat cleared whenever I tried to make a sentence hold more than one idea. Maya pushed a chair away and stood. Numbers are not everything, Marcus. You know that. Her voice broke on the last word and then steadied. I took shifts. I covered Jordan's weekends when his kid was sick. I missed my sister's recital because I was the one who stayed. I want acknowledgement, not a lecture on policy. She met Marcus's eyes and he did not look away. Lee tried to mediate. We can look into compensation adjustments, alternative responsibilities, or a development plan. We can document contributions for the next review cycle. Her proposal hung in the air like furniture. It smelled of her solutions that often fell short of repair. I stepped forward with a different sort of attempt. What if I propose a concrete fix? I said, promote me into the East account lead, but assign Maya a client portfolio with immediately measurable goals and a salary adjustment tied to those goals. Or we split project leadership so Maya gets the formal title on the other account. I named specific options because specifics are what you can fight over without getting lost in feelings. Marcus' hand flicked toward the file. Policies limit retroactive changes to approved promotions. We can create stretch assignments, Jordan, but we cannot reverse the committee decision tonight. His sentence was polite and removed. We will open a formal review pathway. But it will take time. That was the policy barrier. It was a concrete obstacle. It was not cruelty. It was a line the company had set for consistency. But lines do not erase the cost. Maya's shoulders slackened in a way that read as resignation. She folded her arms again, and I saw the map of all the small unmet promises that had led to this moment. Then the surprising moment arrived. Ethan, who had kept his distance so far, pushed a printout farther and said, "There is an internal recommendation from Maya dated 2 months earlier. It names Jordan as a collaborator but recommends Maya for lead on the West account. It never reached the regional committee because Marcus's escalation prioritized the East account." He looked directly at Marcus. "Marcus, did you know that recommendation existed?" Marcus' face registered a flicker that betrayed him. He opened his mouth and then closed it. The room held the air between his jaw and his next sentence. The cliffhanger tightened the audience. Had Marcus known and overridden the recommendation? Had his business decision ignored a formal plea for fairness? Marcus inhaled and said, "I saw several recommendations. Operations requested continuity for East. That required the person who could be on site immediately. It was a business judgment, not an override of merit." His hands were still. He did not deny awareness of the memo outright. The lack of denial felt, in that moment, like an answer. Maya's face changed. The hurt slid into something sharper. Betrayal. She took a step toward Marcus. "You saw my memo and pushed it aside for what? For John client appearances? For optics?" Her voice went high and cold. "You pushed me out in the room where I have been keeping this team afloat." Marcus held his ground. "Maya, the company has to weigh risk. That was my call." His mouth had the small, tight set of someone who believes he can defend a necessary cruelty. Maya turned to me. "Jordan, I trusted you to speak up when it mattered. Did you speak up?" The question was not only about words. It was a demand for a test of loyalty. My next action was the most difficult decision of my life in that moment. I could defend the process and keep the promotion. I could argue for compromise. I could also refuse the promotion and hand the company back to its policies and paperwork. I reached into my jacket and took out the folded resignation letter I had written on the train home the night before, a thing I had not expected to use. I had written it because nights had become heavy with the thought that success might have a cost I could not pay. "Jordan," Maya's voice was small. "Don't." She did not finish. I let my fingers shake as I unfolded the letter. "Marcus," I said, and my voice stayed flat because I had decided not to give anger the shape of a speech. "I cannot accept a raise that costs the person I trusted most here her sense of fairness and standing. I will not take something that adds a wedge between us and leave the repair to policy." I set the resignation down on the lacquered table so everyone could see it. There was a silence big enough to count. Lee put both hands on the tablet like a person trying to steady a cart. Ethan's mouth was open. Marcus stared at the paper and then at me, as if measuring my offer against something he had not accounted for. Marcus pushed his chair back. "Jordan, resigning will not fix the process. It will create a gap on the East account and could put clients at risk." He spoke in the voice of contingency. He expected me to weigh risk and step back. I said, "I know that. I also know taking the raise without addressing Maya's contributions will leave us both carrying a resentment that will rot teamwork. I will not watch her pack this into her life for the next 5 years and tell myself it was worth it." My sentence was short because I wanted every word accountable. Maya's mouth moved, and then she laughed, a small, sharp sound. "You actually wrote it. Jordan, you wrote a resignation." She did not hide her surprise. I met her eyes. "I did." I pointed at the letter. "I have been carrying the idea that success must not cost people the things they deserved along the way. If the company will not make things right tonight, I will refuse to profit from the break." My hands were visible. I folded them on the table to prove the gesture was not theatrical. Lee slid out of her chair. "If you hand in a resignation, We'll need formal procedures. We want to be able to process this on the spot. And Jordan, she paused, we will schedule an exit interview. Ethan looked at Marcus and said, this will mean reassigning accounts immediately. We have a handover plan that can be activated. He sounded like someone cataloging consequences, not judging them. Marcus stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the city lights and then back at the table. If you resign, you remove yourself from leadership. We will fill the role quickly to ensure continuity. Jordan, are you certain? The question was less of a request and more of a ledger entry. I felt the fourth emotion shift then. Resolve settled in where uncertainty had wavered. The resolve did not feel noble. It felt like a pair of hands choosing an exact weight. I had to choose whether to let policy be the final word or to make a visible moral move that would force the company to reckon with its values. I pushed the resignation forward with both hands. Yes, my voice had the same warmth it usually carried in smaller moments. Yes, I'm certain. I've been promoted into something that was supposed to show me as a leader. Leaders take responsibility for the damage their advancement causes. If my promotion will fracture Maya's career and the team, I will not accept it tonight. Marcus' face changed then in a way that gave me new information. Surprise edged into something like respect and then into calculation. He sat back down and folded his hands again. Lee tapped her tablet with a thumb and typed notes. Ethan watched me like someone seeing the end of a play. Maya's shoulders tightened and then loosened in a way that was nearly a sob. She picked up the envelope that had started everything and slid it toward me. You didn't have to do that, Jordan, she said, voice raw. But you did. I answered with practical steps. If I walk Marcus, commit in writing tonight to a measurable plan for Maya, title pathway, compensation review in 90 days, and a client portfolio that recognizes her coverage history. Put it in the minutes, sign it. I will leave my resignation effective immediately after we have your written commitment. I named terms because words are easier to fight over than promises. Marcus looked at Lee and then reached for the tablet. He tapped a few commands and then said, we will document an accelerated pathway and a compensation review. The company will assign interim leadership while a proper handover occurs. I will sign. He did not smile. He signed with the same precise hand he used to sign off on budgets. Lee added, we will note the contributions in the file and create a development plan tied to measurable client goals. We can also authorize a one-time discretionary payment pending review. Her voice had the professional calm of someone turning a crisis into procedure. Maya read the commitment and folded it. She watched Marcus sign the agreement and then looked at me as if the world had narrowed to this one point of light. Jordan, she said, if this is real, then I'm willing to see it through. But if it's not, I will leave, and I will not look back. I felt relief, but not triumph. Relief was small and practical. It moved in the tissues of my face and in the way my breath came a half beat easier. I said, I want to let you take that risk alone, Maya. I want to profit while you lose ground. Lee collected the signed document. Ethan set a calendar entry. Marcus made a note about immediate account continuity. The room shifted from accusation to procedure in a way that felt like the air changing when a floodgate opens. This was not total repair. It was the start of a trackable path. Then the final external event of the chapter occurred. My resignation remained on the table, unsigned for now, but there was movement toward a mutual solution. I realized how many small debts had gathered between us. Favors done at night, last-minute coverages, 1,000 quiet acknowledgements that had never been filed. Marcus' signed note could not rewind them, but it could prevent the resentment from calcifying into permanent fracture. I stood up. My hands had an ache from the fight, but they were steady. I'll stay through the handover this week, I said. I'll help train whoever takes East. And I'll work with her to make sure Maya's pathway is concrete. After that, I'll go. I did not soften the final sentence. I wanted the consequence to be visible. Maya's lips pressed together. She reached out and tapped the resignation with one finger, not to stop me, but to mark that the choice had been witnessed. Jordan, she said softly, thank you. It was not a healing word. It was a ledger entry of gratitude. I took my briefcase and left the conference room with my resignation in an envelope tucked into the inside pocket. The corridor felt long in the night. I walked to the balcony because I needed air that wasn't filtered by fluorescent lights and her templated language. Dawn was coming and the city lights looked like a scatter of small unpaid invoices. I stepped onto the balcony and leaned on the metal rail. The cold bit my jaw. Maya watched me from the glass, a silhouette through the fog of early light. She did not follow. She stayed inside, shoulders squared, arms folded in the posture she used when she protected herself from surprise. I watched the last of the city's neon blink and fade. She opened the glass doors and then closed them without stepping onto the balcony. She mouthed something I couldn't hear. Her face had a look I recognized, the look she had when she decided to confront someone at the coffee machine months earlier. That day had been loud and immediate. This morning had the same consequence but quieter lines. She had challenged me, and I had answered with a choice that could cost me my job. She had forced the company to record its commitments in ink. The dawn came in a thin pale ribbon. I slid the resignation into the envelope again and closed it. The letter was a concrete thing with my name and date on it. It was not a metaphor. The city took the night from the skyline, one office light at a time. I felt a hollow, not of despair but of something calibrated, what I had given up, what I had kept. A concluding event. Lee sent a calendar invite that confirmed the 90-day review and the compensation pathway for Maya. Marcus walked past the balcony, glanced at me, and nodded once. It was small, but it was acknowledgement that he recognized the cost of the corporate decision. Maya watched him sign the calendar entry through the glass. I folded my hands over the rail and let the air steady me. The confrontation in the glass room had resolved into steps and signatures. The immediate fracture between Maya and me had not healed. It had been named and given a plan. That plan would require follow-through. It would require the company to keep a promise. It would require me to leave. I stepped back from the railing, turned my face toward the building's warm interior light, and felt the last of the night's adrenaline drain. I had chosen a visible cost for a private responsibility. The cost would change more than one life, my own, Maya's, and maybe the team's. I walked down the corridor with my resignation in my pocket and the signed commitment in her system. The day was starting. The consequence was real. Emotion shifts through the chapter ran from resentment to doubt, then to suspicion, then to clarity and resolve. Those shifts drove each decision I made. I had been tempted to accept a promotion that would have left a friend carrying the work without recognition. I had chosen instead to lay down that advancement so I would not profit from a fracture. The choice did not erase the sting of what had happened, but it turned resentment into a set of formal steps the company had to track. At the door to the lobby, I paused and sent one last message to Maya. I signed the document. "I'll be here this week to hand over things properly." She replied with a single word that hung on the glass in front of me. Okay, it was not victory. It was not guarantee. It was a commitment to a process that could still fail. I walked out into the morning and felt the city breathe differently. The chapter closed on the concrete action of my resignation and the formal commitments Marcus had signed. Nothing was magically repaired. Maya and I would need to rebuild trust by doing the work, not by saying things. That rebuild would start with measurable actions recorded in her and with me stepping away rather than stepping up. The last line of the chapter is not an abstraction. It is a scene. I put the resignation into the hard drop box on the first floor, watched the slot swallow the paper, and moved on. The elevator doors closed behind me. Maya watched through the conference room glass as the paper disappeared. The consequences were now lodged in company records and in our shared memory, and both would demand accountability in the days to come. I left the tower with a long list of consequences and a shorter list of possessions. The most important thing I carried out was not a title, but a choice I had made openly. That choice had a price. I would meet it.